Hello everyone, Mr. Radtastic here. Just letting you know that I promised to you all that I would not swear during this podcast. So this is a warning that I do use the swear word that means child of an unwed couple for its intended definition in this movie. This is your warning. You're listening to the Radical Ideas Podcast. Episode 5, Aquaman. We start off in Amnesty Bay, Maine, and we meet the 10-year-old Arthur Curry, who is currently out swimming in the ocean, and we see that he's able to breathe underwater. He is collecting old, lost lobster traps and freeing stuck lobsters. As the lobsters leave, Arthur tells them, "You're welcome," as if they'd thanked him for saving them. Arthur returns to the surface, where we meet his father, Thomas, who is there waiting for him. He says to his son that even though he knows Arthur can breathe underwater, it's still scary when he doesn't come up sooner. Arthur apologizes to his dad and leaps out of the water. The two of them have dinner, and later we follow Arthur as he goes to school. We see that it's Mother's Day, and the kids are all making cards for their moms. But Arthur is sad. We see his teacher walk up and pat him on the back and hand him something else to work on. Arthur gets picked up from school later, and when they get back home, Arthur looks at the picture of his mom and dad holding him as a baby. And he asks his dad, "How did Mom die?" But Thomas insists to his son, "Your mother isn't dead. She is Queen of the Mermaids. I know, Dad. And Jason's dog isn't dead. It's just living on a farm upstate. I'm not stupid." And we see that Arthur is holding back tears. Tom rushes up to his son and grabs him by the shoulders, telling him, "No, you are not stupid. You are right about that. But Arthur, look at me. Your mother isn't dead. I have never lied to you about that." Arthur shoves his father back, and we see that Tom is shoved much farther back than we would expect, showing off Arthur's Atlantean physiology. Arthur runs outside, and Thomas chases him. Arthur is crying and looking out at the ocean as Thomas catches up to him and puts his arms around his son. Arthur begins to sob, and he turns around and hugs his dad tight, and we see that it starts to rain. A little while later, Arthur and his father are back inside. Arthur is looking at the picture of his mom again, and he asks his dad to tell him the story of how they met. And so Thomas does. He explains that one day while he was out fishing, he found the most beautiful woman he'd ever seen sitting on the rocks nearby. But as he approached her, she got scared and leapt into the water. Months of these meetups happened, and eventually Atlana grew to trust him, and she spoke to him. She had this beautiful accent, as if she'd never spoken English before. And after a while, she trusted Thomas enough to come onto the surface and come into his lighthouse and have dinner with him. Eventually, that turned into tradition. And soon, she told Thomas the truth. She was the rightful queen of Atlantis, and she had to run and hide from her evil husband. She told Thomas all about how wonderful Atlantis was, but about how scared her people were of surface dwellers. Thomas assured her that she had nothing to worry about with him, and eventually the two fell in love and had Arthur. Atlana actually lived with them for a few years before her people came back for her. Her husband had been overthrown, and the kingdom needed their queen. And unfortunately, Atlana had to leave her family to save her people. We see that Arthur is saddened by this story, still not fully believing his dad about it, but thinking a little bit more critically now. He asks his dad, why didn't Mom take us with her? Why has she never come back? Did she ever really love us? And Thomas tells his son that it's complicated. The storm outside has gotten much worse, and we hear thunder booming. Thomas checks the windows, saying that the clouds are so thick, he's going to go turn on the light early. And we see him head up the lighthouse to turn on the light for the day and to do his regular maintenance. But when he flips the light on, he notices something after a crack of lightning. He looks down at the docks, seeing something moving. The thunder rumbles overhead, and then another flash of lightning lights up the sky, and Thomas sees it. 5 men in dark armor wielding spears climbing out of the water and heading to his house. Thomas sprints back down the stairs, screaming for Arthur. Arthur looks up to his father just as the door to their house is kicked in, and the armored men run inside, trying to stab Arthur. Arthur runs from the men, utilizing his Atlantean strength to leap up to the ceiling and cling on to the ceiling beams. And Thomas grabs a shotgun off of the wall that he kept above a window, and he fires at one of the men, hitting them square in the chest. As Thomas goes to reload the gun, we see that he is using armor-piercing slugs. He fires again, hitting another man. He calls out for Arthur to run. Arthur doesn't want to leave his father, but Thomas insists. So Arthur runs past his father upstairs to the lighthouse. Arthur gets up to the top and is panicking. He steps out onto the gallery looking for somewhere to run, and he decides to head for the ocean. We hear another shotgun blast and then a scream. Arthur cries as he recognizes that as his father. He hears the men beginning to scramble up the stairs behind him, and so he leaps off of the lighthouse. He lands down on the ground in that classic superhero pose and begins running towards the water. But we see as the assassins are hot on his tail, and they leap off the lighthouse with even more ease. They're gaining on him. One throws a spear at Arthur, but Arthur stumbles on a loose deckboard, causing the spear to hit him in the shoulder instead of dead center of his chest, and Arthur falls down screaming and crying as the assassins approach. Arthur believes he is about to die. But suddenly a man wearing bright gold and green armor leaps from the water and in a single fluid motion hurls a trident, impaling one of the assailants, instantly killing them. The other men scramble. The unarmed man who had impaled Arthur runs for his spear, but the man in gold steps between them, and with a solid punch, he sends the man flying back 20 feet. The golden man turns to Arthur and says, "Don't worry, I was sent by your mother." He turns his attention back to the assailants and takes them all out with ease. He approaches Arthur and he snaps the spear in the boy's back, leaving the blade in for surgery later. He grabs all of the dead assassins and ties them up in a net, and then he picks up Arthur, telling him that they have to go. But Arthur weakly asks for his father, pointing to the lighthouse. And the man in gold takes Arthur inside. We see Thomas Curry bleeding out on the stairs. Arthur cries and reaches for his father, and Thomas cries seeing his son injured. The man in gold tells Thomas that the boy will be all right. The spear went clean through, the doctors will make quick work of it, he will recover fully, he shouldn't even scar. Thomas thanks the man, calling him Vulko, and Vulko confirms that Atlana sent him, and that he was barely able to stop her from coming herself. He's sorry that he didn't arrive sooner. Thomas grabs Vulko's hand, and in a pained voice asks, "Will Arthur be okay down there?" And Vulko nods, saying, "I swear to you, for as long as I live, no harm shall come to your son again." Arthur is sad, and he urges his father to call an ambulance, but both Thomas and Vulko confirm that Thomas has lost too much blood. Help wouldn't arrive in time. Thomas tells his son that everything will be okay, and he gets to go meet his mother now. Arthur hugs his father, saying he doesn't want Mom if it means I can't have you. And Thomas holds his son until he passes. Volko grabs Arthur, who is fighting to stay with his father, but Volko tells him that they need to go and get him treated as soon as possible. There could be more out there. Arthur relents and goes with Volko. Volko grabs the dead assassins in their net and leaps into the water, dragging them behind. Arthur is shocked as the man swims through the water even faster than he can, and eventually they arrive at the kingdom of Poseidonus, a beautiful, magical underwater kingdom. Volko enters through a secret passage. He passes the net full of assassins to other men dressed in silver and blue versions of the same armor that Volko is wearing, and he takes Arthur to the doctors. As Arthur is being healed by Atlantean magic, we hear shouts echoing through the halls asking, "Where is my son?" And suddenly, Queen Atlana bursts into the room and makes eye contact with Arthur. We see that they have the same eyes and the same hair. Atlana breaks down seeing her grown son for the first time, asking the doctors if he will be okay, and they confirm that he will. Atlana then switches and begins speaking English, and she introduces herself to Arthur, asking if he knows who she is. Arthur is holding back tears as he nods, recognizing the woman from the pictures at home. Atlana looks to Volko, who is right next to the boy, and asks about Thomas, and Volko sadly shakes his head. Atlana begins to cry, holding back even more violent sobs. She asks Arthur if she can hug him, and Arthur breaks down, saying yes, and they hug. Arthur asks his mother where she has been and why she never came back, who were those men, and Atlana promises her son that she will tell him all about it later. Then we hear another voice behind her ask, "Mother?" And we see Orm Marius. Atlana holds out her hand to her other son and urges him to come and meet his younger brother. Atlana explains to Arthur that this is his older brother Orm. Arthur seems scared at first, but Orm calms him down and seems happy to meet his brother. After Arthur is finished healing, they fetch him some Atlantean clothing. It is finely crafted and appears as fish scales, and Atlana takes her son and explains to him everything he wants to know. She was married to a man named Orvax Marius, Orm's father. He was from a very old and very powerful conservative family in Atlantis, and after they wed, he revealed that his conservatism was even more extreme than anyone had believed. He began to grow violent. He amassed more influence, even more than Atlana herself, and eventually she found out that he was planning to have her killed to assume full control over the kingdom. And so she ran. Volko helped her run, and they hid her where no one would look for her. Orvax continued to rule over Atlantis, and he brought the kingdom to ruin. The people were starving, the rich were hoarding the wealth, and war was brewing between the lower kingdoms. And so, the people of Atlantis called on the High Guard to step in. As a form of checks and balances in the system, should the one who sits on the high throne ever be deemed by the people as unfit to rule, it is the job of the High Commander to execute them. And this was needed for the first time in over a millennium. Atlana left Orm here, because Orvax, no matter how cruel he was to her, never harmed his son. And if she had taken him, there would have been no hiding. She ran, and she hid, and she hoped that one day her people would call on her again. And they did. So she had to return to save her dying kingdom. Arthur asks her why she never came back to visit, and she explains that as the High Queen of Atlantis, she can't go anywhere without her royal guard, and she can't have Arthur's existence get out. Arthur looks confused, and she explains that Atlanteans fear the surface dwellers. Orvax had stoked those flames of fear into violent hatred, If anyone ever found out Arthur was part human, she truly doesn't know what could happen. The only ones who know the truth are here in this room right now, Orm and Volko. Arthur is scared, but his mother assures him that everything will be okay. They just need to change his name. Arthur is a surface name. Arthur asks his mother what she wants to call him, and she asks him if he likes the name Orin. Arthur nods, and Atlanna smiles, saying that was her father's name. Now they'll need to teach him to speak proper Atlantean before he can make any public appearances, but Volko will handle his lessons. Arthur turns to Volko, who nods at the young boy. And we cut to weeks later. We see Orm taking Arthur on a tour through the royal palace with Volko. Arthur is asking Volko what it's like being the High Commander. And Volko says that it is a lot of hard work, but it's worth it to serve the people. Arthur asks how you become the High Commander, and Volko says that you get elected. The High Commander is the last line of defense between the people and an abuse of power, and it is for that reason that the people choose their champion. Arthur's eyes are full of childlike wonder as he asks, "And that's why you have the gold armor?" And Volko chuckles, saying, "Yes, that is why I have the gold armor." Orm then regains his little brother's attention, showing him the hallway of their ancestors. We see paintings and sculptures of the past rulers of Atlantis, including a damaged statue to Orvax. The statue is wearing a metal helmet that the audience would recognize as Ocean Master's helm. Orm mentions that the statue originally had been torn down, but Atlanna had it restored so that the people would never forget. Arthur then speaks up in Atlantean and asks Orm if he misses his father. Orm stops for a moment, looking at the statue, saying, "Very much." He shoots a glare at Volko, who seems very somber looking at the statue. Arthur nods and says that he misses his dad too. Orm hesitates for a moment before saying, "Your Atlantean is getting much better. I'm sure the announcement tomorrow will go wonderfully." And then they pass a statue of King Orin, Atlanna's father, and Arthur's new namesake. The audience will again recognize that this statue looks exactly like the adult actor who plays Arthur. As they continue down the line, Orm points out more notable ancestors of theirs. And finally, they get to a large statue. A beautiful marble carving of a man wielding a trident. Arthur gasps in awe and asks who it is, and Orm explains, "That is Poseidon, the god of the seas. He gave his life to transform his followers into Atlanteans, and he sank the kingdom to save their lives from the violence of the surface dwellers. All of the royal line of Atlantis is descended directly from him, and his trident has the ability to control the sea itself." Arthur stares at the statue in wonderment, and the scene transitions, focusing on the trident, as it turns into the real golden trident wielded by Atlanna. She is floating above the palace, and we see her speaking to the entire kingdom of Atlantis, with court magicians magically broadcasting her speech to the lower kingdoms. Atlanna announces to her people that, as they all know, when Orvax rose to power, she was hidden away until the people deposed him. But what they did not know is that during her years of absence, she had fallen in love with a man on the outskirts of their kingdom. He lived a simple life, somewhere that no one would go looking for her, and she and that man had a child. The people of the kingdom gasp and begin to gossip, but Atlanna continues, saying she'd left the child with his father, fearing for their lives should they return to the kingdom with her. Fears that were well warranted, as many weeks ago, assassins found them. The crowd enter a nervous rabble, speculating who could have done this, and Atlanna is crying as she says, the man who she viewed as the singular love of her life was killed. But thanks to the quick actions of High Commander Volko, Her son has survived, and he is here with them now. The citizens all begin to get rowdy, and Atlana loudly proclaims, "Here, before the high kingdom of Atlantis, with the blessings from all of the lower kings and queens, I officiate my second born." She turns back, and Volko brings Arthur out to his mother. She takes his hand and shouts out, "Hail, Prince Orin, High Prince of Atlantis!" She raises her trident, it begins to glow, and waters begin to swirl around them, creating a beautiful display as the kingdom erupt into cheers. The crowd chant, "Orin! Orin! Orin!" And we transition to 8 years later, but we still hear the crowd chanting his name. And we see the now 18-year-old prince in a round of mock combat. He is wearing a black and blue suit and wielding a silver trident. He is fighting against members of the High Guard. But we see Queen Atlana, Volko, and a grown Orm watching from the spectating stand. A large crowd has gathered here today to witness the prince's final test to graduate officers' school and join the ranks of the High Guard. Arthur is doing phenomenally well, and Atlana leans over to Volko asking, "Are the guards going easy on him? Or is my son truly this talented?" Volko smirks and confirms to his friend, "I have overseen the boy's training personally. And my queen, what you are seeing is quite possibly the greatest fighter the 8 kingdoms have to offer." We see Orm scowl at that comment. Floating next to Orm is a beautiful woman with the lower body of a fish, and in her arms is a 6-year-old girl with red hair. The little girl loudly cheers out, "Go, Uncle Orin!" Orm shushes her, and the woman holding her says, "Shh, listen to your father, Tula." But the little girl giggles, watching her uncle kick some Atlantean butt. Arthur manages to disarm and knock out all of the guards around him before the sound of the victory horn is blown, and the crowd erupts into screams and cheers. Volko raises his hand, and they grow silent. Volko addresses the crowd, saying, "Typically speaking, the final combat trials for the High Guard Academy are not this public, but the prince always seems to draw a crowd. Prince Orin of Atlantis, welcome to the Atlantean High Guard." The crowd cheer, and Arthur screams out in victory. He darts towards his family in celebration, and Tula leaps out of her mother's arms and swims into her uncle's. He spins her around, and she asks if he heard her cheering for him. And Arthur says, "Of course I did. How else do you think I managed to win?" Tula giggles, and she and her uncle do a double high five before he scoops her back into his arms and floats to the rest of the family. He bows to his mother, saying, "Your Majesty," and then he turns to his brother and sister-in-law, saying, "Your Highnesses." He bows and presents them the still giggling Tula. Lori Lamaris takes her daughter from him, telling her brother-in-law congratulations. The family all congratulate Arthur, and he thanks them. He smiles at his older brother, saying, "Who knows? Maybe one day I'll be your High Commander." And Orm laughs, saying, "They'll see." But that still won't change his position as the little brother. And the brothers laugh. We then cut to the graduation ceremony, and we see the new members of the High Guard swear their oath. They will defend the kingdom of Atlantis with their lives. They will prioritize the protection of their people above all else, even the orders of the crown. They are the Atlantean High Guard, and they stand in defense of Atlantis. And they are all rewarded with their High Guard uniforms, the silver and blue suits of armor that resemble Volko's. That night, the royal family are all gathered for a celebratory dinner. Arthur is happy to have gotten through his training and to officially be a member of the High Guard. Volko congratulates the boy, saying that he's never seen a more qualified candidate. Atlana sheds a tear, telling Arthur how proud she is of how far he's come. Arthur thanks her, and Orm pops in to remind Arthur that starting tomorrow, he will be treated as any other member of the High Guard. No more bodyguards, no more royal quarters. Arthur nods, saying he knows, but he feels like this is what he's meant to do. He wants to help people. And since Orm is the crown prince, he thinks that being a member of the High Guard is the best way for him to do that. And besides, it's not like they'll no longer be a family. He'll still be able to talk to his mother and brother. That's not going to change. But there's an awkward silence, as it seems that everyone else here knows that that isn't going to be true. Volko breaks the awkward silence, telling Arthur his assignment as a High Guard. He is going to be sent to the kingdom of Zebel. Once there, he will head to the Silent School and return with High Magister Locke and his newly selected apprentice, after which Arthur will serve as that apprentice's bodyguard. Arthur nods to his commander, and they all finish dinner. Orm stares at Arthur the entire time. The next morning, Arthur heads out. We see Orm watching his brother leave through his bedroom window. He looks disgusted. Lori cautiously approaches her husband, asking him how he's feeling. And we see that he snaps at her, saying that if he had anything to say to her, he would just say it. Her asking is presumptuous. Lori shrinks away and apologizes to her husband. Orm is frustrated and orders her out of the room to go take care of their daughter. Back with Arthur, we see him swimming at supersonic speeds across the ocean, before finally reaching the Kingdom of Zebel, located next to the Mariana Trench. It is one of the oldest kingdoms under the sea. Arthur arrives and checks in with the local chapter of the Royal Guard, who direct him towards the Silent School. It is the preeminent sorcery school under the water. As Arthur is swimming, he witnesses a magical display. A woman with bright red hair wearing a deep green suit is instructing an advanced hydrokinesis class. Eagle-eyed viewers will be able to spot a small boy with dark skin and platinum blonde hair amongst the students. The red-headed woman makes eye contact with Arthur and heads his way after the display. Arthur tells her that that was a tremendous show, and she thanks him. She introduces herself as Meera Nereus, Princess of Zebel. Arthur gets flustered and sets himself back to best behavior, introducing himself as Orin. She eyes him up and down and asks, what is a High Prince of Atlantis doing at a sorcery school dressed as a member of the High Guard? She looks around him for more royal guards, and he informs her that he actually serves in the Royal High Guard, and he is here to escort High Magister Locke and his apprentice to Poseidonus. Meera smiles and says, oh, well then I look forward to our trip. Arthur looks confused for a moment before realizing Meera is the apprentice. He smiles, saying he will do his best to make sure they stay safe. They head inside and they meet with High Magister Locke, an older man who looks directly at Arthur and says, by Poseidon's beard, you look just like him. Arthur smiles and the man introduces himself, explaining that it was King Orin who had appointed him the High Magister, and he served him well for many years. He then gestures to Meera, saying, and she will do even better. The next morning, the trio take off back to Poseidonus, and we see a beautiful montage of them swimming through the ocean. But partway through, we begin seeing signs of trash pollution. Arthur stops to free a sea turtle trapped in a set of soda rings. He calms it using his ocean telepathy, and it swims away happily once the rings are off. As they continue their trip, Arthur begins to hear vibrations. He stops and focuses on them, and we actually hear the sounds of gunshots echoing through the water. Arthur looks all around and spots far off on the surface a pirate raid in progress. He grips his trident. Clearly he wants to intervene, but he looks back to Meera and Locke and decides against it. We see this decision tear him up. The trio return to Poseidonus, and they immediately step into a royal council meeting. Locke is there to inform Atlanta that more species are dying out from surface dweller pollution, and Atlanta is looking very concerned. Orm mentions that the food shipments from the capital have been being raided by starving bands of bandits, and with the crop yields being diminished by surface pollution, people are getting desperate. Atlanna voices that the time to reveal their existence to the surface may be close at hand. Orm suggests that if they do, they should do it with a show of force. If the surface world knows that the people of Atlantis exist and that they are not to be trifled with, then they could bring an end to this. But Atlanna tells her son to not underestimate the surface. Atlantis revealing itself could turn the entire surface world against them, and this is a fight that the kingdoms would not win. Orm tells his mother that she is the one underestimating them, but Atlanna urges her son to listen to her. Arthur tries to speak his mind, but both his mother and brother silence him. Arthur is taken aback, realizing that the dynamic between them really has changed. After the meeting, Meera asks Arthur what it was that he wanted to say during it. But Arthur says that he shouldn't. He needs to remember his place is as a guard now, not a prince. And Meera agrees with him, and then says, "As a princess of Zebel, I order you to speak your mind." Arthur looks at Meera and thanks her. He says that he agrees with both his brother and his mother. It may be naive, but he truly believes that if they revealed themselves to the surface in an act of benevolence, they could unite the two worlds and work together to solve their mutual problems. They're more similar than they want to admit. Meera praises his optimism, but expresses her own doubts. Orvax fanned the flames of hatred for his entire reign. His death and the recent increasing hardships are only causing more people to think the way that he did. The people are angry and scared. The crown helping those who are actively hurting them could be seen as a sign of weakness and spark a revolution or a civil war. Arthur supposes that she is right, but he still insists that helping others would be the best way forward. As Arthur escorts Meera to her new chambers in the castle, once she has turned herself in for the night and the castle guard have arrived to watch her room, Arthur is dismissed of his daily duties. But we see that he sneaks out. Arthur swims through the pitch-black ocean back to the site of the pirate raid from before, and he finds a lifeboat with sharks circling it. We see surviving crew members, many wounded and bleeding. They are scared. Arthur uses his telepathy to force the sharks away, and we see as he summons a blue whale. It swims up and lifts the boat from the water. The crew begin to freak out, but then all begin to laugh. Arthur asks the whale to take the people near the shore. The whale lets out a confirming call, and it swims off, and we hear the people cheer. Arthur smiles, and he heads back down to the kingdom. Later, we see that Meera is tasked by the queen to look into the failing crops around the 8 kingdoms. And so, Meera and Arthur begin to travel amongst them. We see that during a stop to Shieris, a young boy, maybe 8 years old, wearing red and blue, excitedly approach Arthur as Meera is working her magic. In the kingdom of Nanaove, we see a royal family consisting of anthropomorphic great white shark people. In the kingdom of Lemuria, we see a king and queen with a striking resemblance to Lori Lamaris, fishtails and all. During the montage, we see Meera working her magic on her crops, and we see Arthur helping local farmers do their duties. We see many people thanking Arthur and Meera, and we see as Arthur continues to sneak off to the surface to help others with his ocean telepathy, never revealing himself. Days and weeks and months go by. We see more and more of Arthur and Meera helping the kingdoms, and we see every night Arthur escorts Meera to her sleeping quarters. Meera says, "Good night, Orin," and Arthur says, "Good night, Your Highness." We see that exchange over and over and over again. We see as Meera begins to steal looks at Arthur as he is helping more people. We see as Arthur is stealing looks at her as she is doing her magic. "Good night, Orin. Good night, Your Highness." The montage continues. More helping, more good nights, until eventually Meera pulls Arthur into her room with her. As the montage continues, we see Arthur and Meera clearly falling head over heels in love with each other as they help all of the kingdoms under the sea. Until finally, it is 10 years later. We see a group of pirate ships heading towards a Wayne Enterprises cargo ship. But as they are gaining on them, several orca whales begin to breach around them, and they knock the pirate ships over. The pirates all scramble to their lifeboats as their weapons sink into the ocean, and we see a smiling Arthur, now 28 years old, as he tells the whales that they can go back on their way. And beside him, we see Meera shaking her head. Arthur goes to speak, but she cuts him off, saying, "I know, helping others is the best way forward. That relentless optimism of yours makes it so hard to love you." She swims forward and steals a kiss from him, saying, "But it's also the reason I do." Arthur kisses her back and asks, "Is it time we head back?" And Meera nods and gestures for him to follow. Arthur and Meera once again return to Poseidonis for another royal council meeting. But as they swim towards the capital, they see a massive assembly of Orvax supporters, sporting his coat of arms, gathered outside the castle. They are calling for Atlanna to take action. They are starving. Atlanna insists to the people that they are working on it. The High Magister's apprentice is returning shortly from finalizing her research at the Silent School. That is when she sees Meera and Arthur swimming towards her. She gestures to them, hopefully trying to ease some of the crowd's frustrations, but the crowd is having none of it. They are accusing Atlanna of being weak. The people begin to get rowdy, and so Atlanna brings out Orm, and the people begin to cheer for the son of Orvax. Arthur and Meera head inside the council chamber, and we see the now 16-year-old Tula Marius run up to her uncle and give him a welcoming hug. She asks, "Are there any more whale stories for me?" And Arthur nods, saying, "This time I asked a pod of orca for help." We see them giggle, and we see floating behind Tula, dressed in high guard armor, the little boy, dressed in red and blue from before, now full grown. Arthur gestures to him and asks, "So how does Sir Garth fare as my niece's loyal protector?" Garth and Arthur smack their forearms against one another's in the Atlantean equivalent of a fist bump, and Tula responds that her uncle trained him well. And then the council meeting begins. Tula and Arthur collect themselves and focus up. Atlanna and Locke ask Meera about her findings, and she confirms that through concentrated efforts from all 8 kingdoms, they could have a significant reduction and even reversal of what the surface dwellers are doing to the waters. But that is if the surface dwellers cease their pollution. If not, this is a losing battle. They could move deeper into the trenches, and as a last resort hope to outlast humanity and reclaim the oceans after they all die out. But Atlanna says that she will not be the queen who allows her people to hide in the trenches. She turns to the council and says, "It is time we officially begin strategizing for surface contact." The council all begin speculating, how would Orvax's loyalists react to such news? And that is when Orm walks in, saying that they wouldn't mind if it was done so with an act of war. The council murmurs in objection, with Atlanna reiterating to her son that that is not a winning fight, but Orm scoffs, saying, "The ocean makes up 3/4 of the Earth's surface. It is where life originated, and it is why life continues. And we are its masters." Gesturing to Atlanna's trident, he says, "The trident of Poseidon could sink their mightiest cities. We could wipe out their leadership before they even knew we struck. We can bring them to heel, and we can save both of our worlds. Progress is not made without violence." The council are stunned at his words. None of them are able to offer a rebuttal, but Arthur says it could be. Everyone freezes at this brazen disregard of the rules. Even Volko appears shocked that Arthur dared to speak. Orm turns to his brother in disbelief and says, "What was that, guard?" Arthur looks at his brother and says, "It could be, Your Highness." It seems to me that the problem with those in power is that they are too quick to enact violence as a solution, when you could choose benevolence. Atlantis speaks up, telling Arthur to mind his place in this court and for him to leave the room. We see Orm fuming at his brother's words. Arthur heads out of the palace and is stopped by Volko, who admonishes the boy for his outburst. Arthur tells Volko that this is ridiculous how these people act. Volko reminds Arthur that this is what he chose. You wanted to help people through action, not policy. No whining about it now. But Arthur is still furious, saying, "They talk about my people as if they're monsters. I was raised up there. They are the same. We all are." Volko pats him and tells him that while that very well may be, one boy from the surface can't undo 2,000 years of fear, even if he is the prince. Arthur feels dejected, and so he heads out for a swim. Meera finds him later. We find him brooding on a rocky outcropping. She asks him if he's doing okay, and he says that he is, and apologizes to her for his outburst from earlier. Meera sits beside Arthur, and she says that she's always found his optimism about the surface dwellers refreshing. Her family hated outsiders. They even hated Arthur for being a bastard. Anything foreign and different scared them to the point of violence. But Arthur has never been that way. She looks at her love, and we see her looking intently into his eyes. And we see that she's about to ask a question. But they once again hear gunshots. They swim out and find yet another cargo ship under attack. Meera asks Arthur if he's going to call for help from his whale friends. But then they hear muffled screams as crew members are being shot. And Orm's words echo in Arthur's head. Progress isn't made without violence. Arthur looks to Meera and tells her, no. And he takes off to the surface. On the surface, we see a band of pirates raiding yet another Wayne Enterprises cargo ship. They are firing at the crew, who have taken up defenses but are severely outgunned. Several are wounded already. One of the pirates runs up on a crew member and looks like they are about to fire, but they are knocked back into a shipping container by a burst of water. The other pirates turn to look where that came from, and suddenly, leaping over the side of the ship in the exact same pose as when Volko leapt out of the water to save him, Arthur appears and hurls his trident, pinning a pirate's arm to another container. Arthur leaps into action, disarming the pirates and knocking them down. We see as he grabs their weapons and snaps them in half when he gets a hold of them. And soon, all of the pirates have been dealt with. Arthur leaps back into the water and shortly returns with a discarded fishing net, which he uses to tie up all of the pirates. He then goes and checks with all of the crew. They are speechless. We see that they are wearing Italian flags on their uniforms. And as Arthur dives back into the water, one of the crew members says, "Un uomo d'acqua?" which roughly translated means, "a man from the water?" And we see as the camera pans over, showing the ship's security cameras. We cut to Italian news footage of Arthur's rescue. We then see that footage spread around the internet. When it reaches U.S. news stations, Uomo d'acqua is translated to the Aquaman, and we see the internet comments go abuzz. We then cut to a marine biology lab in Florida. We see a woman watching the footage on her phone. Her face grows cold, and we see her step into a supply closet, where she pulls out an Atlantean communication device, and she calls in to her commanding officer. We cut to the throne room of Poseidonus, where Atlana has Arthur dragged in. Orm is standing beside her. She orders the guards to leave them immediately, and she displays the footage of Arthur, saying, "You revealed yourself to the surface? You are a member of the Atlantean High Guard. You swore to protect your people, and now you jeopardize their very existence? What have you to say?" Atlana is clearly hurt beyond measure in this moment. And Arthur says, "I was defending my people." Have we truly lied about my origins for so long that we've forgotten them? I was raised among them, Mother. My father was one of them. I heard innocent lives in danger, and I stepped in. I defended my people above all else, even the orders of the crown. Arthur quotes the Atlantean Highguard oath to his mother. Atlanna is taken aback by this outburst. By revealing yourself to your surface brethren, you have exposed your Atlantean ones. You've endangered our existence at a critical time. You committed treason. Orm is reveling in this, and he pipes in to remind his mother that the punishment for treason is execution. Atlanna gestures to Orm to emphasize to Arthur the severity of the charges at hand. But Arthur responds, "And what was it when you revealed yourself to my father? When you had a child with him? Was that not treason? But you call me traitor. You fear the surface world so much about what they could do to our kingdom, but you sit content having a surface dweller as your son, as your brother. I am human and Atlantean." The throne room grows quiet. Orm goes to speak, but Atlanna stops him. She says, "As a member of the Highguard, it is not my place as queen to pass judgment. Your sentence falls to High Commander Volko. For now, you will be locked in the dungeons until a verdict is reached." And we see Atlanna, heartbroken, gesture to Volko to take Arthur away. Volko swims down and grabs Arthur and escorts him to the dungeons. As they go, Arthur apologizes to Volko, but Volko stays quiet. And after he is locked away, Volko stares at the boy and says, "I'm proud of you." And he swims away. Back in the throne room, Atlanna is distraught as Volko returns. She looks to her oldest friend and asks, "Is he right?" Volko responds saying that he isn't, but he does have a point. Orm and Atlanna have spent so long trying to decide what to do about the surface, and they've ignored the boy who grew up there. Atlanna sits on her throne and pulls up the footage of Arthur's rescue again. She comments about how happy the humans look after. Volko points out that even despite the immense gap in strength between them, Arthur handled that entire fight without taking a single human life. The boy is good, but he would expect nothing less. Atlanna calls in the captain of her spies and asks, "What have the humans been saying about my son?" The captain kneels before her queen and says, "Admittedly, the humans are excited. They suspect that Prince Orin is some sort of metahuman, and they are speculating whether or not he is a new hero." Atlanna asks, "You mean like the Superman or the Flash?" The captain nods, and Atlanna dismisses her. She and Volko have much to think about. The camera pans and we see a hidden passage behind the Atlantean throne, where Orm is listening in. Later that night in the dungeons, we see Garth wake Arthur up. He has sneaked Meera into the dungeons to see him. Meera grabs her love through the bars and then hits him, saying that she cannot believe that he committed treason. But then she hugs him again, saying but she is happy to see that he is alive. She asks what he was thinking. Arthur says that he had to help, but Meera says she knows that, but what is it about surface dwellers that cause these emotions in Arthur? He cares so deeply, so passionately about them more than any other surface advocate. And she asks what he's keeping from her. She knows that he lies sometimes, but she can't figure out why. Arthur looks to her. He then looks down the hall where Garth is waiting, looking for other guards. And he looks to Meera and says, "Do you promise not to tell a soul?" Meera agrees, and Arthur comes clean. We see that Meera is surprised, but she doesn't recoil from him. She asks him, "Your name isn't Orin?" Arthur shakes his head and says, "My father named me Arthur." Meera reaches out and touches his face, saying, "Arthur." Arthur apologizes for lying to her, and she pulls him close, apologizing back, saying that she is so sorry that he has had to hide who he really is. They hear the sound of approaching guards, and Garth comes back to fetch Meera. She and Arthur share a goodbye kiss, and Arthur is left alone once again. And the next day, he is brought back from the dungeons before his mother and Vulko. They inform Arthur that starting today, he will no longer serve his position in the Atlantean High Guard. Arthur looks devastated, but accepts this punishment. And Atlanna continues, saying, "Instead, you will serve a new position within the Guard. Surface Ambassador." Arthur looks up, stunned. Atlanna says, "You were right. You are of two worlds, and your oath was to protect all of your people. So, Vulko and I are ordering you to uphold that oath. But this is not without punishment. You still acted against the crown. And so, Vulko and I are sentencing you to community service." Vulko releases the shackles from Arthur's hands, and Arthur looks back up to his mother in disbelief, asking if this is real. And Atlanna beams, telling her son, "It is. From now on, your duties are to protect the people of the surface, to garner goodwill for the Atlantean people. But you are not to reveal to them your true origins until Vulko and I order you to. By assisting the people of the surface, he will be assisting the people of Atlantis. Do you understand your assignment?" And Arthur rushes up and hugs his mother. She is taken aback by this, but soon embraces her son. And Arthur races outside. We see him rush immediately to Meera and embrace her in a big hug, spinning her around in the water. Meera is shocked to see him out of the dungeon and asks what has happened, and he says they listened. "They're letting me help." Meera embraces Arthur, saying that she is so happy for him, and she's excited for what this could mean for the future of Atlantis. She gives him a big kiss and tells him, "Go protect your people." And Arthur takes off to the surface. We then cut to Orm's room, and he's throwing a tantrum. Lori Lamaris is cowering in the corner as Orm is screaming about his brother. The traitor is allowed to do what he wants? Mother's favoritism continues. I have put up with that filthy half-breed for too long. Lori is horrified. She asks her husband what he means by that, and he slaps her, telling her to be quiet. There's a knock at the door with a guard asking what's wrong. Orm collects himself and leaves the room, telling the guard nothing. We see Lori left alone, crying. And we cut back to the ocean. We see a massive storm has overturned a fishing boat. The Coast Guard are there with a helicopter pulling men from the water, but one of the men is struggling. His flare isn't working, and no one can hear his screams over the storm. But suddenly, Arthur pops up next to him. The man is shocked, but Arthur tells him to trust him. He grabs the man and swims him over to the rest of his crew. The man cries and thanks Arthur as Arthur takes off. We then see a woman on a surfboard screaming as a great white shark snaps at her, grazing her leg with its teeth. The blood drives the beast into a frenzy, and it darts towards her. But then we hear the telltale sounds of Arthur's ocean telepathy. The shark calms, turns from the woman, and swims away. And then Arthur appears before the woman and apologizes on behalf of the shark, saying, "I'm very sorry. She thought you were a seal." The woman is confused and scared, but manages to get out, You talk to fish?" Arthur thinks about it for a moment before saying, "More or less." He offers her a ride back to shore. He drops her off on the beach, and beachgoers are in awe. One of them shouts out, "It's the Aquaman!" Arthur waves at them, and then leaps back into the ocean in a display of superhuman athletics as the crowd cheer wildly. We see news report after news report of oceanic disasters and crimes being thwarted worldwide. Aquaman's name is reported beside those of the Flash and Superman as the new modern age of heroes. And then we cut back to Atlantis. We see Atlanna and the rest of the Royal Council reacting to Arthur's surface reception. They are all in agreement that with this amount of goodwill he is earning, they should be able to reveal themselves to the humans sooner than they'd thought. And Atlanna says that the real test are the upcoming High Commander elections. If Arthur is elected the new High Commander, that is the time to reveal all. If the people select him as the champion of Atlantis, she is confident that if they reveal the whole truth about his existence, that the people would accept him. But we see as this irks Orm. And that night he leaves his bedchambers through a hidden panel in his back wall. He descends deep into the depths of the palace, coming out in the dungeons. And we see as he approaches members of the royal guard, who bow to him and refer to him as my king. Orm stifles a grin as they say that, and he tells them all that they need to accelerate the timetable. We then cut to Election Day. All of the peoples of Atlantis are gathering in their respective kingdoms to vote for the new High Commander. As we cut around the kingdoms, we see the faces of many of the people that Arthur and Meera had helped in the last decade. We then cut to Atlanna and Vulko overlooking the gathering of voters in Poseidonis. But something is wrong, and we see that the guards on duty to guard the Queen are the men that Orm was talking to before. Vulko can feel something off, and the men pounce. Vulko and Atlanna fight against the traitorous guards together, with Atlanna using the Trident of Poseidon to create a massive burst that shoves everyone out of the throne room. This blast catches the attention of all of the voters who have gathered at the polls outside. They look up and see the Queen being attacked by her own guards. Arthur, who is down below amongst the people beside the other members of the High Guard, leaps into action. But as he does, we see other members of the High Guard attack him. We see the other members of the High Guard and the Royal Guard confused as to which side to help. As the battle rages on, the crowd is horrified, and Meera steps in as well. We see Vulko is wounded, being stabbed in the gut by a spearman who gets lucky, and we see Atlanna stabbed in the shoulder. Arthur and Meera dart up and manage to save both of them from killing blows. They send 2 members of the Royal Guard who are on their side to take them to see the healers. The attack has failed, and the people cheer for Arthur. But that is when Orm arrives. With his mother injured, Orm takes command of the kingdom as Prince Regent. He takes the Trident of Poseidon, and he orders the would-be assassins to be executed immediately. The men working for Orm look shocked, but they are executed before they can get a word in edgewise. Arthur grabs his brother, asking what he's doing. They hadn't had time to interrogate the assassins yet, but Orm tells his brother that members of their own guard just tried to kill the Queen and the High Commander before the entire kingdom. And besides, he already knew who ordered them to do so. Prince Orin. And we see 2 other royal guards grab Arthur. The crowd gasp in shock, and Orm tells them that he uncovered this plot only moments before the attack began. Prince Orin has been lying to all of them. The people know that the prince is a bastard, but what they didn't know is that he's also a half-breed. I've recently discovered that when my mother ran away during my father's reign, she hid on the surface and had a child with a surface dweller. There was no assassination attempt. Orin found his way to the kingdom and blackmailed the Queen to acknowledge him as her offspring. His brother is a monster, and he's been living with him for years, but he never suspected him to be capable of something like this. The creature that I call my brother loathes Atlantis, and he has worked towards its downfall. I suspect that the only reason he joined the High Guard in the first place was that so he could begin to influence the people to have him execute our mother himself. Arthur tries to deny these charges, but Orm hits the final nail in his coffin, saying if there were any doubts where Orin's true loyalties lied, I will provide it. And Orm displays the news footage of Arthur saving surface dwellers. The Kingdom of Atlantis see this, see Arthur committing treason on camera, and they are outraged. Orm orders Arthur and all of his conspirators to be thrown into the dungeons. Arthur and Meera are dragged down and thrown into cells. We see Atlana and Volko already there. They were not taken to the healers, and those guards worked for Orm as well. He has orchestrated this entire thing. Meera tries to cast magic, but the dungeons are warded against it. They are trapped. They are all speechless that Orm could do something like this. Atlana asks how he could betray them like this. And that is when Orm steps into the dungeons saying, "How could I betray you? You betrayed me. You left me as a child." Atlana insists that she only left Orm because he knew that that is where he would be safe. But Orm responds that Orvax was not a monster. Orvax was never cruel. He was a visionary. He saw the dangers that humans posed and the damage they were doing to the oceans. But when he called for action, he was called mad? And now they are 30 years later, and everything his father said is coming to pass. If they had attacked the surface when Orvax wished all those years ago, they would have won. They could have wiped the humans from the face of the earth. And so I am going to fulfill my father's dying wish. Arthur calls out for his brother, but Orm screams at him, saying, "Never call me that again. When I found out about your existence, I was sickened. A human had polluted Poseidon's bloodline. That's why I tried to have you killed when I found out about you. If Volko had just been a few minutes slower, none of us would be dealing with this, and your name never would have made it into the annals of history." Arthur and Atlana are speechless. Orm was the one behind the assassination attempt all those years ago. Orm smiles and says, "Yes, one of your guards was still loyal to my father. They followed Volko out on one of his annual checkups on the boy. I tell you, Mother, I already hated you by then. But when I found out about the bastard, that is the day I stopped respecting you." Arthur asks his brother why now. Why didn't he kill him earlier? And Orm says, "Because Volko was too good. I knew that while you were inside the walls of Atlantis, you were untouchable. That attempt when you were a child was my first and only shot until now. Coups rarely work, but revolutions, when the people think they're the ones making the decision, those stick. So I destroyed a few food shipments here and there to speed up the scarcity. A few bribes to orators to spread the news that I wanted the people to hear. Originally, I was just going to wait it out. I knew that Mother intended to pass the throne to me in the next couple of years, and I was content to wait. And then you all started talking about making peace with the surface world. That I cannot allow. And so, I will step into the role as Orm, son of Orvax, Atlantis' savior. But don't worry, I will let you live long enough to see me destroy the humans you love so much. Atlanna says that Orm can't do this. The Prince Regent cannot declare war while the Queen is able to speak. And Orm looks at his mother and chuckles, saying, "Oh, mother, I know." And he leaves the room as Arthur screams for his brother. Outside, we see Orm swim past Lori and Tula. They both look horrified. Tula is asking her father what's happening, that none of this can be right. Her uncle couldn't be a traitor. If she could only just go and talk to him, but Orm whips around and slaps his daughter, ordering her to stay away from the dungeons and never refer to that man as her uncle again. But Lori grabs her daughter and shouts at Orm, "You will never strike our child again, do you hear me?" Orm rolls his eyes and floats away. And we see, as he passes through the Hall of Ancestors, he grabs his father's helmet. Orm floats out to the balcony, smashing the trident of Poseidon against the ground, and it echoes through the kingdom. He announces, "The Queen is dead. My mother fell to her injuries just minutes ago. The healers tried their best, but she was pierced through the heart. But I swear to you all, as your new king, I will avenge her." He places his father's helm on, completing his Ocean Master suit, and he calls out, "Armies of Atlantis, your High King calls upon you now. Tonight, our war with the surface begins. No longer will they poison our waters, no longer will they taint our blood. We shall make them fear the power of the ocean, for I am its master." And he holds up the trident of Poseidon, forming a massive whirlpool. We see the armies of Atlantis gear up, soldiers and civilians wanting to fight, grabbing their weapons and assembling outside of Poseidonus. But we also see many people refuse to go. They are in mourning for their queen. They are in shock about their champion. But Orm assembles his invasion force, and the army head out. Later that night, we see the prisoners all sitting in defeat. Orm has won, and he's already left to invade the surface. Poseidon knows who his first target will be. But as they're sitting there, they hear a commotion, a fight breaking out in the guards. And suddenly, swimming up to them, is Lori Lamaris, Tula, and Garth holding up the rear, knocking out the royal guards. Lori is holding the cell keys. When she sees Atlanna, she says, "Praise Poseidon, you're alive," and she apologizes to her family. She tells them Orm has always been horrible to her, but she was too afraid to do anything about it. But he struck their child, and she will not allow that to happen ever again. Once they are freed from the cells, Meera rushes to Atlanna and Volko and begins treating their wounds. Arthur asks them what they should do, and Atlanna tells Arthur that he needs to stop his brother. Arthur asks how he's supposed to do that when Orm has an army, and Garth tells Arthur, "But you will have the High Guard, Commander." Arthur looks stunned, and Garth says the results were finalized earlier. Arthur won by a vast majority, with Volko coming in second. Volko coughs up some blood as Meera finishes healing his gut, and he says that he knew Arthur had it in him. If the people see him and his mother alive, he will earn their trust again. And so they all head out. The remaining royal guard turn to face the group, but when the High Guard see Arthur escorting Atlanna, they leap to the Queen's defense against Orm's guards. The family make their way out to the kingdom, and Meera uses her magic to call upon the people of Atlantis again. There are gasps and shocks as the people see their queen lives, and Atlanna addresses the people. She tells them that some of what Orm said was true. She did run to the surface, and Prince Orin is half human. But everything else was a lie, and she lets Arthur speak. Arthur stands before his people and says, "My name is not Orin. It's Arthur Curry, My father was a lighthouse keeper, and for the first 10 years of my life, I believed that I was a human, and that my mother was dead. But when I came here, I learned the truth. I fell in love with this kingdom, with its people. Arthur goes and grabs Meera's hand. But I love my first home as well. I've never stopped. I have lived in both worlds, and what you need to understand is that they are not two separate worlds. They are two halves of the same one. When I joined the High Guard, I swore to protect my people. That means the humans and the Atlanteans. Yes, I was helping the humans, but I had not exposed Atlantis. I was doing so under the orders of the Queen and the Royal Council. We were working to garner goodwill with the humans before revealing ourselves, so hopefully we could become allies and work together. The humans have no more reason to fear us than they do themselves. But my brother is going to jeopardize all of that. If we do not go and stop his attack, then our worst fears about the surface will all come to pass. The humans will want to destroy us. Yes, I lied to all of you for years. I hid the truth of who I was in fear of how I would be treated. But my actions for the kingdom have always been genuine. I swore to protect you all, and now I need your help to do that. My brother lied to us all. He told you that the Queen was dead, but here she stands. I beg of you, let go of your fear of humanity and lend me your trust. Help me save us all. And the people of Atlantis let out a loud cheer. And as they do, Meera casts magic on Arthur's armor, and we watch as the silver and blue High Guard armor changes into the orange and green armor of the High Commander. And the people cheer even louder. Arthur has his army. We then cut to New York City. We see a fisherman standing on a pier casting his line, when all of a sudden all of the water recedes rapidly. He looks up and sees a massive tidal wave headed towards the city. Atop it, Orm and the army of Atlantis. Orm stomps his trident into the water. It echoes through the city, and we see the panicking citizens of New York as Orm smiles and the wave hits. Arthur and his forces finally arrive, but find destruction. The entire island of Manhattan has been engulfed by the sea. Orm has raised the waters around the city as his first display of power against the surface. We see citizens of New York clinging to light poles and fire escapes. We see families struggling to stay together as the waters swirl around them. And Arthur gets to work. He orders his followers to help as many humans as they can, and he is going to find his brother. We see Arthur, Vulko, Atlana, Garth, Meera, Tula, and many of the other guards and citizens that Arthur helped throughout the movie rescuing people and making sure that they are okay. And we see as they begin to fight against Orm's soldiers. As Arthur is fighting off a group of soldiers by himself, one soldier leaps into the air to stab down at him, but they are sent flying backwards by a powerful gust of air. And Arthur hears someone behind him say, "Excuse me, Aquaman? I'd really hoped to be meeting you under different circumstances." And Arthur turns around to see Superman floating above him. "Hi, I'm Superman. Big fan of your work. Based on these men trying to kill you, I'm hoping that means you're not involved with this attack?" Arthur assures Superman that he is not. This is his brother's doing. Superman tells Arthur that he is sorry to hear that, and that he says that he will find him and stop him. But Arthur pleads with Superman, saying he needs to be the one to stop his brother himself. There is more here at stake than you realize. Superman stops and looks at Arthur, and he decides to trust him. He holds out his hand, and Arthur shakes it. Superman says that he will save as many people as possible and try to stop as many attackers as he can. Arthur thanks him and says that he will confront his brother and end this. Superman tells Arthur that he trusts him, but the people's safety comes first. If you don't end this soon, I will. Arthur nods and thanks Superman again. Superman looks at Arthur and says, "Let's save some lives," and he takes off into the sky. We then cut to Atlana as she is fighting off some soldiers, but other soldiers freeze upon seeing the queen that they believed to be dead alive and fighting against them. And that is when Atlana spots Orm. She calls out to her son to stop, but he refuses. He gestures to the humans around, saying, "Look at their weakness. They are the most pathetic beings on the planet, and they are the ones destroying it. They are sickening. And the thought of you choosing them over my father is disgusting." And Orm pierces his mother through the heart. Atlana looks at her son as tears fall from her eyes before she passes in his arms. And we hear Arthur scream out. We see that Orm's eyes are also filled with tears as he kills his mother, but his conviction is strong, and he turns to face his brother. But we see that Atlana's death has shaken many of Orm's followers. The brothers begin their battle in the flooded streets of New York. Orm has the upper hand. With the trident of Poseidon, he is able to control the very waters around them. But Arthur is the champion of Atlantis. They fight, and he manages to disarm his brother and catch the trident for himself. And in an instant, the storm that Orm had summoned dissipates. And Arthur points the trident towards his brother. Arthur's followers call out for him to kill Orm, invoking the duty of the High Commander to execute a mad king. But Arthur refuses. He instead uses the trident to unflood New York entirely. The city is damaged, but dry. Arthur announces to his people that they need to do things differently. And we see Superman flying above the crowd, smiling at Arthur's decision. Arthur turns and announces to all of the humans that can hear that the actions today were caused by misguided Atlanteans, led by Orm. Orm's actions have shattered the trust that he has been trying to garner with humanity. And it is for that reason that Atlantean justice cannot be served today. Instead, Orm will be turned over to the humans to be punished for his crimes as they see fit. And Arthur turns Orm over to Superman. Arthur promises Superman that Atlantis will pay for the damages to the city and help rebuild. And he and Superman shake hands once again. And as this happens, we hear a sonic boom. And suddenly, appearing in the crowd, is Barry Allen, the Flash, asking if he missed the mermaid invasion. Later, back in Atlantis, we see Arthur is nervous. It is his coronation day. With Atlana dead, and Orm never officially coronated and now imprisoned on the surface, the line of succession falls to him. We see Meera swim up to him and assure him that everything will be okay. She trusts his judgment and knows that he will do what is best for the people. And Arthur says that this would all be a lot easier if he had a strong queen to stand beside him. Meera looks at Arthur with disbelief as he drops to his knees and pulls out a fine golden crown. Meera's eyes fill with joy as she nods and embraces her fiancé. We hear a cheer and we turn to see Tula watching from the doorway. She swims up and embraces her uncle and future aunt. Lori, Garth, and Volko then swim in, and Volko tells Arthur that it is time. Arthur heads out to the throne room. We see the kings and queens of all of the other 7 kingdoms of Atlantis gathered for the ceremony. We see Meera's parents, and beside them, a woman who appears identical to Meera, except with purple hair and wearing red armor. Arthur addresses the kingdoms. "I know what you're all thinking. the High Commander is about to be crowned the king. And while that will make me Atlantis' first democratically elected leader, it is also a concerning consolidation of power. Which is why, today before you all, I would like to select my niece, Tula Marius, as my successor for the throne. I shall serve as your king and your high commander until the day she is ready to take the throne. He turns to his niece and says, "She has all of the heart of her mother and all of the strength of my brother. She will make the perfect queen." Tula cries with joy hearing her uncle say this about her. And turning back to the crowd, he says, "You all elected me as your high commander because you believed that I would defend the people no matter what. And I stand before you today asking for you to extend that same trust to me as your king." And all of the people begin to cheer. Volko and Magister Locke descend before Arthur and present to him the trident of Poseidon. Arthur takes it and holds it above his head. Water begins to swirl in the same way that it swirled around his mother during his announcement, and the people begin to cheer out, "Hail, King Arthur, High King and Champion of Atlantis!" As the scene fades out, we fade into a new scene, and we see Orm floating in a high-tech aquarium tank. The screen reads Belle Rev Penitentiary. A woman walks in, saying, "Our estimates say that there are over 10 million of you down there. If you and your brother are typical examples of your species, this is not something our government can be unprepared for again." And stepping out of the shadows, we see Amanda Waller. She looks into Orm's eyes through the walls of the tank and says, "You are going to tell me everything I need to know about Atlantis." The end.